acknowledge the historical, present, and ongoing trauma within our systems. Prior to each of our virtual events and events of the community, this is a vaccine trauma acknowledgement statement. While within public health, right, we recognize that vaccine remains one of the 10 greatest achievements in public health. We know that unfortunately there have been times in our profession journey where different individuals have been abused, their rights have been violated. So we share this one with that recognition, and then also acknowledging with the community that we're in the midst of an evolving pandemic, that the science around this work continues to change, and we're asking them to trust us in knowing that the science that we're currently providing are factual and that we need them in order to respond to what we're battling. Our work, as we shared, really remains powered by partnership. We are able to do what we're able to do as Multnomah County because of the amazing partners that we have, both large organizations as well as small and emerging entities. So as I shared with our flu clinic that we've actually now shifted into different efforts relating to the COVID vaccine, we've established different drive-through clinics in different parts of the county, as well as partner with different organizations who have opened up their doors and welcome in to offer either weekly or different mobile settings. We do both COVID testing as well as COVID vaccine. Our work as public health remains data informed. We really look to prioritize and make sure that we're really reaching those who have been most impacted, those who lack those who we know lack different barriers and support. Like one of the things that we see that we know is a challenge is around transportation. So as we're planning our future weekly sites, we're going into areas and neighborhoods where we know that we go to the community rather than the community coming to us. As I also shared, our efforts are really culturally specific. Because of COVID, we have to shift into the virtual space. And we know that shifting to the virtual world shouldn't mean that we have to lose our culture, right? So when we're hosting virtual events online, we started by playing music. We bring and weave in culture, really because that's what the community have access to do. We know that when we're having conversations about vaccine and all that's going on in the state that we've been in for the last year, that a number of our community members are experiencing different level of challenges, right? So we try to weave in innovative ways to allow and remind us of our culture, the strength and resilience that we have, and also to remind us to stay connected. So as part of our work, we have included digital media campaign. We have several that went out for our flu campaign, one recognizing that there are a lot of people who are on social media, and we definitely recognize those who are not. We also do PSAs. We're in newspapers. We create video and the messages where we encourage community members to text them through WhatsApp and other channels and mechanisms. So these are just want to give some of the flavor of what we're doing. As I shared, we've used our flu work to help to pivot into COVID response. And as we're doing the COVID vaccine, we have a campaign called Multiple Vaccinate, where we're encouraging community members who have taken the COVID vaccine to upload their pictures, share their why, and it will be part of a digital campaign that we're doing. So in partnership with a number of our different partners, Dr. Wong spoke to it, we've been able to host different culturally specific sites throughout the county. These are just snapshots of just some of the different efforts. We use Sign Up Genius specifically for the REACH program. We partner with one of our longstanding partners, Highland Haven, and held an event on February 19th. And that event was planned in 4 days. And I always have to say, because I cannot believe we did it. Well, we vaccinated over 400 people. And if you recall what happened over that President's Day weekend, it was snowing. However, our staff were so dedicated, went out, checked out that location, and we were ready to go and welcome over 400 community members into that space for vaccines. And actually, we also just had an event on Monday at the picture at the bottom. It's from our Facebook page. We had an event out at the East Portland Community Center, and we're going back out to Highland Haven on this Friday for the second vaccine. But the county, we have a number of different partners that we partner with to host different, both culturally specific efforts, as well as targeted based on the criteria that have been established by the state. So thank you for the opportunity. That's the end of our presentation.
Great. Thank you both so much for that wonderful and informative presentation. At this time, we're going to go ahead and bring up some Google Slides for the legislators to present on.
Okay, before we do that, Lucy, let me just say, you know, how grateful I am to Dr. Wong and to Charlene McGee, not only for being with us, but for doing the work that they're doing. You know, I will say, I know I'm speaking for my colleagues, we have received a fair number of emails from constituents who are challenged with access to the vaccine. I will say, just speaking for myself, that has really improved a lot over the last couple of weeks. I think, you know, people are getting appointments at the convention center as we're getting more doses. The system of notification seems to be working out much better, obviously, than it was a month ago. And so I'm not really hearing from people, you know, with those levels of concern. But what I am hearing, and I was hearing this actually throughout, was concern from people, not only or not so much for themselves, but for people who are not really engaged with email or, you know, the internet or whatever, and just a lot of fear that they're going to fall through the cracks. And so, you know, these programs that you're doing, I think, are incredibly important. And I just wonder, and I'll ask this question of you, how are we going to know who we're not seeing, right? You know, as we do these outreach activities, people are still going to fall through the cracks. And how do we identify them? And how can we perhaps all pull together to, you know, to help our neighbors?
Thank you for the question. So I'll certainly say, I know one of the things we definitely recognize is that we know we're dedicating and putting a lot of time into setting this effort up. And with all of that, we know that unfortunately, there are some folks who are being left behind. And honestly, part of this presentation is also an invitation to all of you. I will include my information in the chat. The truth is, this is an all hands on deck approach, right? For us to reopen as a country, as a county, as a state, requires all of us, those of us who are connected to information. I can share, like, even being a county employee, you know, sometimes I think people think we work 24/7, but that's okay, right? People will email or call, and I'm on the phone helping to sign people up, right? Part of it, we're asking community members to step in and do the same. We have different trainers programs and efforts that we're doing. We're standing up some like texting events. Honestly, also, I would say we're also open to ideas that you may have that we have not considered, because we do realize there are we know that the digital divide is a very real thing. You know, we know that, I have 2 cell phones, right? That's not the norm for a lot of people. I have 2 cell phones, my work laptop, my personal laptop, plus my child, we know that's not the norm for everyone. But, one of the things I found myself really reflecting on when I think about this, I think sometimes it's important for all of us, right, to remember where we came from. And I'm really inspired by folks from, I think back to like the 60s, the civil rights movement, right? On how they were able to mobilize without social media, without Facebook. And I think sometimes we need to remember that and go back to the old ways. Believe it or not, sometimes I think technology is just too much. We need to go back to the old way of doing things. But I think this again, right, is a reminder that call your neighbor, check on people. If you have that link, sign that person that you know is not connected. I know a couple of the churches or different partners that we work with, they have a phone tree, right? Where when one person gets that information, they're tasked with calling that next person, and so on and so forth. We're seeing examples where young people who are very technology savvy are signing up seniors. So those are just some of the examples of things that we're learning and integrating into our response, but certainly open to all recognizing that we don't have all the answers. And I'll include my information in the chat.
Thank you very much, Charlene. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Wong or for Charlene?
I have a question. I'm sorry, I can't get my video to work, so I have to pretend what I look like. Hi, Charlene. I wanted to ask, because I understand the highest number of COVID really has to people who speak Spanish, and what is the county doing about that? That's the last stats I've seen. I don't know what they are now. Could you speak about that?
The one that I was going to say, your team is leading that.
Yeah, there are a lot of things happening. Like actually since the very beginning, we saw the high number for the Latino Latinx community. So there are like collaborative, actually Latino community collaborative, including a lot of partner organizations and a lot of cultural specific organizations doing this. And actually, I think we just had one culture specific, Latino community specific clinic, just like 2 or 3 days ago or yesterday. And then we will have another one coming up. And then because we understand, particularly for, cultural specific clinic that can really create a welcoming space, and also have like I mentioned, community health workers that we contracted with and we have been partnered with, they will be part of the welcoming, they will be at that clinic, helping out with a lot of things, including signing up for the second dose and things like that.
What about the homeless community? Do you go to the tent communities?
Yeah, so we have a number of different strategies. We have teams that are working with the homeless community, our seniors. We even have a partnership to our county Aging Veterans and Disability Services, where they're also doing home visits to vaccinate people. So again, sometimes we have to test out ideas right before we roll it out, like in terms of the population. But those are some very promising ideas that we're looking to replicate. I know we're also in partnership with Portland Fire and Rescue, where they're helping us both vaccinating our community sites as well as going into some homes. And we're hoping, I'm like crossing my finger, one of the ideas that we have is really even thinking about how we can partner with, Portland Fire and Rescue, because they're EMTs and they can give vaccines for folks to go to the neighbor fire station. So again, these are some innovative ideas, but we also have bureaucracy that we have to work through. And we have standing orders, right? Because you're working with medical information, but we're definitely trying to, exercise some of these different ideas. And I love the ice cream truck idea. I'm actually taking note of that.
Great. And I'll just chime in and thank you. This is Nika from Rep FAM's office. Thank you so much. And we want to make sure we have some time for the legislator updates as well. But thank you for putting your email and phone number in the chat for folks who have more questions.
Thank you so much, Charlene and Peru.
Really, we appreciate it. Okay, what's next?
We are going to go ahead and bring up the Google slides so that we can go through some of those legislative updates. So it should be sharing now. Eileen, do you have the Google slides? I'll take 1 sec. It just takes a moment to transition. Okay, let me assist with that. So we will, let's started at the end. Okay, great. So we just wanted to
start off with some of the bigger issues that are facing our communities, and each rep will have some time to talk about it, and then each rep will also get, our senator will also get their topics that they want to bring up. Did I cover everything, Lucy?
Perfect. Thank you.
You want me to just go ahead and start with a quick, just a couple words on this, and then move to Senator Devereaux, then move to Rep. Pham?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so I would say just in the big picture, we are in this really striking situation, very different, you know, in so many ways. It's different, so different from a year ago when this started, but also different from 9 months ago and 6 months ago when we were getting really dramatic revenue forecasts that called for, that we're going to require significant cuts to our budgets. And yet we continue to, two things. Number one, we have had an extremely uneven recession from this pandemic, right? Where really it is hitting low income people disproportionately at the same time that the pandemic health-wise is impacting people of color disproportionately. So at the other end of the spectrum, our tax revenues continue to come in. The real estate market continues to be booming. The stock market continues to boom. And now, so that's item number one. And item number two, we now have a new presidential administration that passed the people call the American Recovery, and that's not it. It's ARPA, ARPA. So they passed another really significant program where a lot of money is going to be coming into the state, which is a good thing, right? So not only do our state revenue forecasts have been looking better, and so we're feeling better about that overall, but we are also about to have a really big chunk of money come into the state through this federal program. The problem with it is that it's one-time money. And so what we need to do is to figure out how to best use it. There's going to be streams coming in for schools, for cities, for counties, all sorts of things, and to the state. And we are going to need to figure out how to best allocate that funding with the acknowledgement that it's one-time money. And so we would be doing ourselves and our citizens a disservice to use it to set up things that are going to have ongoing costs, yet to use it in the most useful and productive way. So things like, you know, what are kind of some of the big picture underlying things that can really make a difference that take one-time investment, like broadband, like HVAC systems in schools, like earthquake resilience is another thing I've heard people bring up. But that is what we are looking at now. So it adds this really interesting layer to what we are doing as we go through the regular session. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rep. Pham. Apologies, when the way the slide was up before, I thought I was first. So, but Rep. Pham, to have the to talk about the ongoing really terrible increases in violence and racist acts against Asian American, Oregonians, and Americans.
Thank you, VSW. Thank you, Rep. Smith Warner. Can we go off screen? I feel like this is something where it might be good to just talk face to face. I wish that we were all in person and in community and could hold space together. This has been a really hard day for the Asian American Pacific Islander community and for all of us, right, who are just horrified by these attacks. 8 people killed, 6 of whom were Asian, and we know that this is about racist violence, it's about gender-based violence, it's about gun violence. All these intersections are really coming to a head, and we've been hearing reports of increased hate crimes, increased anti-Asian rhetoric, and this is entirely expected. But I also wanted to just really call out the need for us to come together to demand some changes and to really figure out what we can do as a community to make sure that everyone is safe going to work or walking on the streets. And we've heard so many in my own district, in the Jade district, so many reports of vandalism of Asian-owned businesses and, you know, verbal attacks, you know, up to the president calling this the Chinese virus, and a lot of scapegoating of our Asian communities. So I just wanted to really hold some space for the sorrow that I'm feeling. I know many of you are feeling, and the anger. And I also just want to acknowledge the loss and pain of the 8 families, right? These are people who had their own families and their own stories, and I don't want to lose that in the media conversation about, you know, about the perpetrator and what his thinking was, or how we're going to label this. This is multifaceted, and as while it's important to label it as a hate crime, it's also just really important to keep the focus on the people who are impacted, their families, their dreams, and really centering all the communities that are most impacted, because we know that this is not the first attack, and it's unless we do something about it, it's not going to be the end. People in my community are really carrying a lot of fear about just being attacked, just walking down the street or in their workplace, simply because of their skin color, who they are, or their gender identity. So I really urge us all to come together as an elected official. I'm going to come together with other elected officials to make sure that we're advocating for changes. I just started in January. I'm just one legislator, but I'm committed to working together with all of you to make sure that we can acknowledge this horrific pattern and really work together to address it. I welcome anyone who wants to share any other questions or comments in the chat box. But just wanted to say that I actually had other things we wanted to talk about, other topics, and I'll have some time to talk about my legislative priorities. But I just wanted to take some time at the beginning of this meeting to really acknowledge the fear and the grief that so many are feeling right now.
Thank you, Con. I'll take over. And before I talk about school reopening, I was going to frame that in the context of, it's been a year since our schools closed, right? But it's also been a year since we saw the first attacks on our Asian American neighbors in the and the Jade District. Actually, before the pandemic even came to Oregon, we saw vandalism and attacks, and that was over a year ago, and it's so frustrating. But thank you very much for the tenor of your comments, Con. So school reopening is something that, as I think there has been a lot of debate over when it would be safe for Oregon schools to reopen to in-person instruction. The science has been mixed, people's positions have been mixed, but fortunately, for all sorts of reasons, here in Oregon, and especially here in the Portland area, our case numbers have really gone down significantly, and we have known all along that if there is a lot of COVID in the community, whatever you do in your schools, it's going to be hard to reopen them safely. But fortunately, because of the steps that I think that the governor took, that we all have taken to keep ourselves and our neighbors safe, those numbers have come down significantly. And so schools are set to reopen. And, part of the debate over the reopening has been, if you reopen the schools, can families who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable sending their kids back to school for in-person, perhaps because they have vulnerable people in the household, they live in a multi-generational family, or for whatever reason, will they be forced to send their kids back to school? And I think for many of us, that would be unacceptable. And so the governor has just done an executive order, and the department has turned that executive order into a series of policies. And it's the exact nature of the reopening is up to individual districts. But they are all expected to reopen to in-person by the end of this month for the younger kids, and then by the week of April 19th for the older kids. Portland Public Schools has just reached an agreement with their teachers over what that reopening would look like, striking the balance between safety and providing in-person opportunity for kids. And I think the union, is voting to approve that today. Maybe they already have, and the school board tomorrow. I think that's right. Anyway, it's right around now. I had the good fortune last night of being in a school for the first time in a year. We legislators were invited to see how reopening would look at one of our newest and most beautiful schools, actually, Fabian. I was able to go there. Barbara was supposed to be there, but for some strange reason, she was still on the floor of the house yesterday evening. That's a whole other story. But it was a very good tour, and I will say it was great to see that the district has purchased a lot of masks, a lot of personal protective equipment. There is plenty of sanitizer. There are air purifiers for all the rooms. Those will probably mainly be deployed to the older schools or those whose ventilation systems are not as easy to take care of, so that the circulation is really good, etc. Anyway, it was good, and they're excited. They have some of the teachers are going to continue to teach completely virtually. Those, was kind of, they had the first choice if they wanted to do that, and there are a number of teachers who are really good at it, and there are a number of teachers who want nothing more than to be close to their kids again. Okay, 6 feet, but still that's relatively close. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. As you know, I chair the Senate Committee on Education, and this is obviously something I've been following very closely. I will say just one thing before we pass it on. I've written about this. Really pleased that the legislature has stepped up to invest $250 million of our general fund dollars towards summer programs this summer to help kids catch up, not only with their coursework. That probably, will be a minority of what's going to happen, but most of it's going to go to camps, to programs, to things that bring kids together in a safe way and let them have some fun and really take advantage of the outdoors this summer. I'm really, really excited about that. So,
yeah, so much.
Next.
Yeah, so I'll return us back to the slideshow, and if Rep. Smith-Warner, if you want to kick us off.
Sure, if you want to show those slides, I will model good behavior for my colleagues about walking briefly through them. So 2 things I'm gonna lead with. First of all, I'm the chair of the Rules Committee. So the Rules Committee in both the House and the Senate, technically it deals with elections bills, and also in this year, we have a few kind of miscellaneous bills that don't quite fit in anywhere else. And so we are doing some work in that committee. Specifically, we are doing have some really great bills this year on expanding our voter access, as well as campaign finance reform. As most of you probably know, we did pass a ballot measure allowing us to establish campaign contribution limits campaign finance limit.
What is that
We need
noise?
to figure out and put together a proposal about what that's going to be. So we also had a great hearing on reestablishing voting rights for adults in custody in Oregon, about changing the ballot deadline so that you can mail it. Your ballot can be not just received by election day at 8 o'clock, but postmarked by that day as well, to go along with the fact that we now have paid postage in addition to being all vote by mail. Couple other things as well. So those have had a bunch of good public hearings. And it is also a place where I have had the privilege of introducing and soon to move a couple bills from Reimagine Oregon, which is a Black-led idea factory, as I think of it, of people and organizations, Black Oregonians, mainly Portlanders, but Black Oregonians who came up with a list of demands to help address some of the white supremacy systems and structures that need to be addressed. So the three bills that you see on there, it's one of those things, some of these things cannot seem big individually, but overall they are chipping away at some structural issues that we have had. So we've got a bill, and again, this is from Reimagine Oregon. I was just the introducer and the carrier, to require racial and ethnic impact statements on our bills, the way that we do fiscal and revenue impacts, so that we can acknowledge the reality that lots of bills and policy have disparate impacts on different racial groups. We also are working on how to provide some compensation for people to be able to be on state boards and commissions to help them be affordable. So much important rulemaking and work goes on in those, and if people, the one way that you expand people's access is to pay people for doing that work. And as well as I mentioned rules, a lot of laws that we pass really get functionally implemented through the rulemaking process, and this would require they're called rules advisory committees to have broader representation about the communities that are being impacted. So those are exciting. Then we will go forward also into the other interesting part of the rules committee, where all the bills that don't get through on time before our movement deadlines, yet people want to stay alive. So you'll have to wait and see what other interesting bills end up coming to the Rules Committee. And then the next slide, as always, the House is very focused on housing, as we have been for the last couple cycles. I don't need to read this, but just so you know, Speaker Kotek and our Housing Committee Chair, primarily Representative Fahey from the Eugene area, kind of put a whole bunch of our bills and budget asks together into a big proposal that deals with housing, houselessness, all sorts of other stuff. So that is everything from the foreclosure moratorium extension to shelter and navigation centers, helping to provide more funding for unaccompanied homeless youth, healthy homes. There's a whole range of things that we are continuing to do really aggressive work on, and that all of that is looking good and moving actively through the process. That's my spiel so far. Great. Go ahead now, Michael Devereaux, for the next one.
Okay, so I've already mentioned the summer learning, and if you all have thoughts about what you would like to see as part of this summer learning program, please send me an email. Let me know. Again, as I mentioned, some of it is going to be through the schools, but a lot of it is going to be through community-based organizations or the parks. I would like there to be a youth employment component to this. As we have camps and programs, that's a good place for older kids to get some work experience, which is also going to be very useful for them, not only for the pay, but also for, as a learning thing. We all know, I think, we learn best by teaching, actually, or we learn best by doing. In my capacity as chairing the education committee, there are a number of priorities that I've been working on. One of them is has to do with our part-time higher education faculty. This is an issue you've probably heard me talk about before because it's a long-standing problem where at our colleges and universities, much of the instruction is provided through part-time faculty, in part because they're cheaper and our colleges and universities are not adequately funded. We have many people who are working more than a full-time load, but it's spread out over a number of different colleges and universities. They can't get any health care, and it's time to make a change for that. And I'm optimistic we're going to do that this session. As some of you know, I have a real interest in prison education, restoring good programs for our people who are currently incarcerated so that they can be prepared for when they are released. And then when they release, we want to make sure that unnecessary barriers are removed so that they can successfully re-enter and be an asset for their families and communities. One of the things that we're doing to take care of that is making sure that the box, which is that form on a university application where people may be asked, do you have a record, essentially, that is removed. We don't want decisions to be made based on a person's past. We want decisions to be made on a person's potential. And so that box will be removed. Suspensions and expulsions, this is part of an agenda that is trying to obstruct the school to prison pipeline, which is a real thing. And we have kids who are being suspended, expelled from school, and they find themselves on the streets, and that is the last thing that we need to be doing. So we're working on that. Also, finally here, Senate Bill 233, one of the challenges that remains in our higher education system is it's difficult to transfer from college to university or college to college, university to university. People move, people find themselves having to change institutions or wanting to change institutions, and they have to often redo courses or really spend unnecessary time. So we will, at long last, I'm confident this is going to pass, have a common course numbering system for all of our first and second year courses, so that a 121 is a 121 is a 121. And whether you're taking it in high school or community college or university, so that those unnecessary barriers are removed. Next slide.
Great choice.
Yeah, I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, as well as the Energy and Environment Committee. I've been on the Judiciary Committee for quite a while. And as many of you know, I used to chair the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. I remain on the Energy and Environment Committee. I'm obviously very passionate about those issues. I also have a longstanding real interest in immigration, removing barriers to immigrants who are here in our communities, to help them to be more successful and remove unnecessary barriers. One of the first bulleted item is providing legal representation to people who are in our communities facing potential deportation orders, or who, I think many of us are really optimistic that we will get a path to citizenship soon. And when that happens, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to need legal help in navigating the system so that they can take that step that they've been hoping for, longing for, working for. And so we need to make sure that those structures are in place and that they're community-based. So that's what the first item is. Juvenile expunction, we I kind of referred to some of the collateral consequences of having a record. It can get in the way of your going to college or university, getting a job, getting housing, etc. One of the beauties of our juvenile justice system is once you have reached the age of 18, if you have not reoffended, you should be able to have your record cleared. However, it's a very difficult system. And to be honest, the only people who are able to successfully navigate that system are people from families with means who can hire an attorney and make that happen. Right now, only 4% of those who are eligible to have their records cleared have that happen. So we want to make it automatic, and hence this bill, Senate Bill 575, which actually passed in the short session last year, but because of the Republican walkout, it obviously failed with all the others. But we're hoping we'll do it this time. On the energy and environment front, it's time for us to completely modernize our recycling system. We are inundated with plastics that, people think they can recycle, but in fact they can't. And there needs to be producer responsibility in helping us to solve this problem. And that's what Senate Bill 582 is all about. Finally, as part of our climate action work, we are making it a priority. It's a priority for Senate Democrats, and I think it is for House Democrats as well, to move our electricity system off of fossil fuels. And that's what this bill, House Bill 2021 is actually going to be the moving vehicle. We decided that. I've been working closely with Representative Marsh, who chairs the committee on that. Khan has, I think, been very involved as well. I think, Khan, you can speak more to it. I hope you will. So that's it. Is that it for me?
Yep.
Great. Okay, Khan, take it on. Take it over.
Thanks, Senator Denbrough. Yeah, we have so many bills. It was hard to choose some of my top priorities, but definitely this suite of these 3 Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity bills are a top priority. The first one, I'm so excited to say that we passed it out of the House floor yesterday night. We were on the floor until 9 p.m., but luckily that was a great way to end. We ended it early in the morning, but it was amazing. That was my first floor speech on the House floor, and to be able to have such an important bill, also get bipartisan support, and this is a bill that's going to allow the PUC to offer discount rates for low-income households, which we know in this pandemic, it's been an incredibly tough year for so many households. To be able to have a lower, if you're a low-income household, you can qualify for a lower income rate and make sure that people have access to the energy they need to stay safe and stay in their homes. So that's a big priority. Also have Healthy Homes, which Rep. Smith-Warner mentioned briefly. We're excited to say that there was a public hearing on it, as well as it's listed in this big housing package that the speaker and others have put
and
forth.
Many families.
It's $20 million to fund energy efficiency retrofits for more, and just expands access to more low-income communities of color, folks who don't often have the capital necessary to be able to weatherize their homes, have the capital up front to weatherize their homes, even though.
And many families who've been struggling because of the pandemic are desperately waiting for that money to hit their bank account.
As Senator
What's the
Deborah
best
was
way to manage your
House Bill
What
2021
the hell?
major vehicle to advance 100% clean energy this session.
Maria?
We had an informational session today that was really great in House Energy and Environment, and we're having a public hearing next week, and it's garnering a lot more attention and support on both sides and amongst the broader. Hopeful about that one. Next slide. As well, I'm really excited about some positive movement on 82nd Avenue. We have both my bill, House Bill 2744, which will create a fund so that we can actually put money in to make sure that we can make the improvements needed to ensure that the state will transfer 82nd Avenue over to the city. There's some really critical infrastructure improvements that need to be made before that can happen. The funding is a big obstacle, and this will get us a big step towards there. And I'm excited that there's another bill that the Speaker and the Joint Transportation Committee are advancing that will also commit concrete funds to actually be a first step in getting us to the point where then we can apply for federal funding for a lot of the really critical improvements that are needed. You know, this has long been a huge priority of House District 46. There's so many pedestrian and bicycle and automobile fatalities and injuries that happen. So I'm really excited that hopefully this can be a session where we can make it happen. And Senator Dunbar, I don't know if I heard you saying, did you want to add something to the jurisdictional transfer?
No.
Okay.
Just that I'm really pleased that you're taking it on. And it's an issue for District 45 as well, actually. It goes through the entire district. And
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited to work with you.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, 82nd Avenue right now and has long been kind of a dividing line between East and West Portland, when, you know, many of us want to see it as a unifying bridge, right? But it's just hard to get across it, and it needs to become a neighborhood street, a big street, but a neighborhood street.
Exactly. To meet so many of our goals, whether it's about social cohesion or about air pollution or about just basic health and safety. We have several schools that are along 82nd Avenue, both Vestal Elementary and Madison High School. It's a major concern for so many families who live in our area. And then the last priority I wanted to talk about was it's just kind of a broader overarching priority. And it's about really making sure that our revenue system is more equitable. We had the first and not the last racial equity and tax policy hearing in our House Revenue Committee, which got universal good feedback because we know that Oregon's tax system is not equitable. I mean, from its very inception, the history of Oregon has when they put taxes on non-white communities, on Black, Indigenous, and Chinese communities that were living in Oregon. We know that our revenue system has disproportionately harmed and not benefited certain communities. And so I'm really committed to taking an equity lens at all of our revenue policies to ensure that we're actually reflecting our values through our revenue system. I often hear that budgets are a reflection of our values, how we spend our money, but I also think how we gain our money is also a reflection of our values. So I'm looking forward to advance more conversations on the kicker reform. As Ms. Warner was mentioning, that's a big issue this year, as well as mortgage interest deduction reform, a conversation about how to limit second homes, as well as people who make the top 5% of high income earners. And then we would love to expand EITC. This is a bill that I think has a real chance this session. We want to expand the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a critical tool for reducing poverty, to all Oregonians, even including ITIN filers and people who live in mixed status homes. We have many people, if they are U.S. citizens, but if they're living with someone who doesn't have citizenship, they don't qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit. So this, and many thousands of these Oregonians who would qualify are actually children. So this is a huge poverty reduction tool and would be a huge boost for Oregon working families. So excited to champion that, as well as a bill on the pass-through income tax rate, which I will talk about if someone has more questions. But and overall, it's about really evaluating which are the entities that disproportionately benefit. And this is one example of a tax rate that disproportionately benefits some of the wealthiest entities. In this case, they're called pass-through entities, which we know, not everybody can form pass-through entities.
There was a great piece in Business Week about an academic who has just published a book about the racist underpinnings of the U.S. tax system. That's quite amazing. My staff sent it around, my House Majority Office staff sent it around yesterday, and I will, Lucy, I don't know if you have that and can throw it in the chat for folks, or if anybody else does. It sounds just amazing. This Black woman economist who was a tax lawyer and just kind of did this as a sideline for much of her life, and then has gone into academics, and it's really amazing, and it just underpins all of the things that we heard from in that tax policy hearing, and just strengthened them and even broadened them into parts that that hadn't been part of that. So there's more and more great research on that. What's that line about? You get exactly the results your system is set up for. These, the disparities that we find, whether it's health or revenue or housing, they're not disparities. They are part of coming out of a racist system that was designed that way. So until we kind of acknowledge that, see it, and look for opportunities to change it, that's the only way. It's not going to change itself. We can't work on the outcomes without dealing with the inputs.
Con,
I'll
can
try
I?
to find that book title, everybody, and put it in the chat. I'll find the book, and I'll go on mute while I do that.
Okay. Con, somebody asked about SJR 10, the kicker reform proposal. And I will say before you respond to that, one of the great things about town halls like this is I get to see what's happening on the House side. Sometimes the legislature is kind of like ships passing in the night in the first part of the session, where, I certainly know what's going on in the Senate. The House knows what's going on there, and ultimately, I hope to see that bill come over to our side.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Angela, the kicker reform, I think you probably know what the kicker is, but many people don't realize that the kicker actually, because the more income you make, the bigger your kicker is. So the top 1% gets something like, I want to say $14,000 or $16,000, around $15,000 as an average, while the poorest 20% get about $26 in a kicker back. And so it's just something that we have in our Constitution that is really inequitable, and it really deprives our state of being able to have the funds that we need to reinvest in programs that would help close the wealth gap and the inequality divide. So this is something that is frankly probably not going to be able to advance this session, but it's important to have this conversation and be educating people about the inequities of the kicker and the much more targeted ways that we could be particularly helping communities that most need it.
And I think most of you probably know that the kicker was put into the Constitution, I think, in the 90s. So the only way that we can change it is through a vote of the people. And we did change the corporate kicker to have the funds directed towards education, which is a good thing. I think most of us would agree. But I will say that the polling on changing the personal kicker remains problematic. So it's a long-term project.
It's about education, and so people can understand what the benefits would be, what we could do if we were able to target it in different ways. But yeah, so I'm committed to continuing that long-term conversation.
And make it more equitable.
I mean, like so many parts of our policies. And so, Lucy, I don't know if you wanted to direct other questions for us. I know we got some great questions beforehand.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for that. So I'll go ahead and begin the first question that we got. It's directed towards Rep. Smith Warner. Republicans walk out in 2019 and then again on February 25th. When is the state constitution going to change to the 2/3 required quorum?
So I'm just going to do a short answer. I'll let Michael tag in on this if you want. And this is hard to hear, everybody, but everybody on this call, you're not normal people. You pay attention to what is going on. You understand what's going on in your legislature, and you understand the importance of that quorum rule. There has been a ton of research on this, and not only do normal people not understand it, but when normal people are asked about it, they think it sounds terrible. they like the idea. They actually think it's a pretty important security for democracy to require a significant quorum. And so while we have been living with the frustrating results of what that becomes when it is weaponized by a party that doesn't believe in governing or in government, unfortunately, that we cannot find a path forward the way we would have to, which is electorally. Are we going to continue to do things through rule? Yes, we did some house rules that folks are fined $500 a day for unexcused absences. We did some stuff for the rules. The Senate is we did it before session started. The Senate is dealing with some of that now. We just actually got some information recently that actually if you, still not changing the quorum, but if you can tie it to people's responsibilities, you might be able to get some traction with it with the people. But it's one of those things, it's hard to hear, but it is close to impossible to get that through election wise, and that's what you have to do. So we just keep doing the best we can, trying to make bills that are shorter. So when they get read, they don't take as long. And just to acknowledge that until they have some consequences electorally, which they haven't really yet, they're unlikely to change their behavior.
Thank you. And then the next question that we have is for Senator Dimbro. Can you please talk about the status of safe gun storage legislation?
Yeah, the gun storage is probably a better question for Rep. Smith Warner. I will speak to, on the Senate side, the primary or the initial gun safety legislation is one that has passed out of the Judiciary Committee. What the hell? Is waiting for a floor session. And it would restrict guns from public spaces, from public buildings. It would remove guns from the Capitol and from other state buildings as they are prohibited from federal buildings. And it would allow local colleges, universities, school districts, cities and counties, local governments to consider doing the same. That would be a local decision. And that seems the most appropriate way to handle it. It for procedural reasons, it's taking a while for it to get to the floor. The earliest that it could come to the floor is next week. And that's where this will bump up against the quorum issue, right? Because, the last time we had comprehensive gun legislation, the Republicans walked and we had to give it up. This was back in 2019. And it will be a test, frankly. So I expect it to come to the floor probably most likely next Thursday. And so I would encourage you to stay tuned.
Thank you.
Barbara, you want to say something about safe storage? On the House side, I think safe storage, it's a great bill. It's really important. It's the most, I think, the best way to combat suicide, frankly, and gun accidents. But yes. Yeah. Where is that bill?
Still top priority in the House. It actually last week they had a great they did an informational session in healthcare on gun violence prevention as a public health issue, and then a really great hearing on the bill 2 days later. We should see it scheduled for work session. It'll get published, and the next by the end of this week, and it's ready to we're ready to move it on the House side.
Great, thank you for that. And then my next question is directed to Representative Con Pham, and that would be, as the chief sponsor of House Bill 2745, what is the status of this bill, and do you know of any opposition?
Sure. So for those who don't know, House Bill 2745 would require that it would allow for voluntary submission. So completely voluntary submission of race and ethnicity data on voter registration forms. So this is really important because we know that in order to make sure that we are, we've seen in other states that certain communities have been disenfranchised by different changes in voting registration and just different policies. And so collecting race and ethnicity data, even if it's voluntary, will really help us to evaluate how our policies are impacting different Black, Indigenous, people of color communities and different ethnicities. It helps us trace languages and just other ways that we can make sure that our voting systems are truly accessible to all communities. So the status of it is that it had a public hearing in the House Rules Committee, and there were some really great questions people had. If there's real interest and people see the benefits of capturing this data. And people also had some really great questions about privacy and data privacy. And so the coalition has introduced an amendment. They worked with SOS, the Secretary of State's office. And the coalition is also just still really thoughtfully exploring how do we weigh the really clear benefits of collecting this data with also some of the risks of, private, or just some of the considerations about privacy and data collection. So I am really looking forward to continuing to see how this bill develops. And but right now it's advancing really well, and I think the public process is working as it should, which is people are introducing some questions that's making the bill better. I don't see any opposition currently. I think people are just asking really good, thoughtful questions.
As the chair of the committee, I can tell you that the chair of the committee loves that bill and is anxious to move it whenever the advocates and sponsors are ready. And interestingly enough, indeed, in a surprise move, some of the Republicans on the committee made some comments against it because all they could see was, well, who's going to use this? Are people just going to use this for political turnout and whatever? Like they literally could not see the beyond that, like any of the other value. So.
Yeah, I think it does offer the ability to actually, as a community organizer, I really struggled without data. I worked for the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, and we wanted to do targeted outreach to make sure that our Chinese community, our Vietnamese community, our Korean community had access and had community groups who could actually help explain what's in the voter pamphlet, and all this stuff could really help us make sure that people are really informed members of our democratic processes. So I'm really excited about the potential for it and want to do it thoughtfully.
Great, that sounds wonderful. So this is a question directed at any legislature. Right now, with everything being virtual, what have been some of the pros and cons that you're experiencing or seeing?
I'll do a quick pro, which is that the number of, you know how I referenced normal people earlier? The number of normal people who are engaging in our committee hearings and testifying on bills is amazing. Folks from all over the state who are no longer having to deal with taking off work and driving to Salem or getting to Salem or finding childcare or whatever it is. We are really getting a ton more participation from everyday Oregonians all around the state in our bills. And that to me has been really the most striking benefit of this. And it's something that I don't think will go away afterwards. I think we've opened up access in a way that we will continue.
I would echo that. Senator Demo, do you want to share something before we go to the cons?
Yeah, just it is. I agree with that very much, and I know Ann Casper asked the question, and I've seen Ann testify before the Judiciary Committee the other day. I think maybe a couple of times, and I will say there, in some ways, I find these. This is paradoxical, but I find these interactions actually more personal and more intimate than when people come to Salem and are sitting at the table way down below, and we're up in our elevated dais You know, when Ann was speaking to us, to the committee the other day, I mean, she was right in front of me. And I don't know, there's actually, I felt more of a connection. So it's kind of weird that way. You know, I do think there are benefits to this. What you lose is the sort of spontaneous quality of just, you know, running into people and, you know, it's, you know, seeing people getting questions answered really quickly. You know, our staff can interact much more easily. Everything takes longer, I will say, and that is a real challenge to this. So I hope we can put this behind us sometime soon. But at the same time, you know, as was said, I think there are some real lessons to be learned here. And if we can come up with a kind of hybrid approach that includes the openness or, you know, the ease of having virtual hearings, joined with the benefits of in-person, I think our democracy will be all the better for it.
Yeah, the main con, I would say, honestly, it is, I feel like it's for the new members, for members like GripFam who haven't, it's harder to learn your new job. If any of you have started a new job since this started where you're doing it all online, there is just so much that human beings pick up from being with and around other human beings. And I always, you know, there are a lot of ways that you learn the job of being a legislator that are outside of just committees, caucus meetings, and floor sessions. I always think about, there's a legislator lunchroom where most of us eat most times. And it's nothing fancy, but what it is it's an opportunity to get to know each other a little better over meals. And that is, and you get to know people and you get to learn things there, just kind of all those other ways to get to learn the job and to get to know each other. And this is a job where it's about relationships, and those are harder to build when you are not having any incidental contact with folks.
Yes, that was what I was going to say. Not having experienced it, but just experiencing this present reality, I do think that the relationships, it makes me wonder about both relationships within the caucus, but also across the aisle in terms of building relationships with other Republicans. I think it makes it a lot harder because we just see each other in these Zoom, Microsoft Teams committee meetings. So we will actually, starting next week, because it's taking so long to read every single word of the bill, we're going to start being in session 4 days a week. So we will be in Salem more starting next week, and we shall see if that offers more opportunities to build relationships that go, as Representative Warner said, build the kind of relationships that help us to kind of bridge some of the misunderstandings and disagreements that happen in the process of governing.
So if it's any consolation, we in the Senate went through a session where all the bills had to be read aloud, and nobody seems to want to go back to that, you know, either the Republicans or the Democrats. So hopefully you'll be able to move beyond that. It is extremely frustrating.
Great. The next question that I have is directed towards Representative Pham. And the question is, because of the provisions in the new federal legislation, new tax breaks are harder to pass. What about any tax credit sunset renewals?
So let me, that's a very in-depth question. Let me explain for those who may not be following tax policy as closely. So the federal government, with the recent American Rescue Plan, they included a provision. They said, we're going to give you these billions of dollars in aid, and in exchange, you are not allowed to offer any net tax cut to make up. They're worried that states will somehow take the money that the feds are giving and then give tax cuts just to benefit certain individuals without actually, that it can displace federal.
They're worried about Republican-controlled states. And instead of actually getting this money to people who need it, we'll literally just cut taxes on their high income people and businesses.
So it's well intentioned, but the unintended consequence is that that if we wanted to, for example, expand tax credits for some of for earned income tax credits for some low income Oregonians, that would be considered a net tax cut. So we have to make sure that any tax cut that we're giving is also balanced by a revenue generating measure. So we're still, Legislative Council, I just got a briefing on it in House Revenue Committee. I do think that there's a lot of, I'm trying to remember, the sunsets are an interesting model because it's existing law, but then we need to renew it. And so Legislative Council said they are still investigating it, but so I don't have a definitive answer, but we're expecting Treasury guidance to come soon to clarify some of these minutiae of not new tax breaks, which the questioner said. It's clear that new tax breaks may be more difficult, though not impossible, if we can counteract it with new revenue generation. But existing tax breaks usually have a sunset after 6 years, and if we renew it, it's theoretically a new bill, so it could be considered a new tax cut. But the Legislative Council is still examining, and as mentioned, there are several lawsuits happening.
And so I just read something the other day that I found so interesting. You know how all the Republicans voted against it in both the House and the Senate, although they're already all like putting out social media about it and bragging about this thing that they all voted against. And apparently same thing happened in 2009 with the American Rescue and Recovery Act under the Obama administration. So, and honestly, and then they took back the Congress in 2010. So we need to be careful, and not just assume, aren't they, wasn't that a terrible political move for them, to all vote against it, because they did it last time and they still did fairly well. I hope that voters have learned since then. But
great. So we are coming up on to our 7 o'clock end time. So we do have, I think we have some time for a few more questions. So I'll go ahead and ask a question that is directed at anyone, which is what's the current status of the policing bills? They mentioned tear gas, military transfers, arbitration, background checks. If anyone could speak to that, that would be great.
I know they're all moving. Michael, do you?
Yeah, well, I can just say those are being addressed both on the House side and on the Senate side. And on the Senate side, a couple of the bills are moving to the floor, those having to do with the new police oversight system here in Portland. We needed to pass legislation just to make sure that that could be done. With respect to collective bargaining agreements, et cetera. And that has passed, that's going to the floor. There's a bill that's related to arbitration that I believe has passed. And we'll be hearing more. There are probably, I would say, 10 bills in all that you will likely see moving. So we'll see. It's, buckle your seatbelts. We said we would do this, and every special session, we said we would pass something related to police reform, and we have. And some of them were just sort of first steps that needed more work in the long session, and that's what we're in the middle of now.
Great. Thank you all so much. With that being said, and seeing that we are almost at time here, Representatives and Senator Denbrough, do you happen to have any closing remarks or anything that you would like to share?
Just stay engaged, all of you. Thank you. We are all hoping that better times are ahead. It's been kind of a rough January to now, right? It's that whole tide of rising expectations. Oh, new president, and then it comes, and then, whoo, everything is still so hard. And so I would just say, you know, keep your eye on the horizon and be as positive as you can be, because we are, you know, things are trending in the right direction. And I hope that by engaging with what we are doing in the legislature, it helps give you a good focus that to know that we are still able to do good, important policy work here in the state.
Yeah. And let me say, one of the downsides of being in the middle of a session is it's so preoccupying, you know. I mean, as soon as we hang up here, I have to go, there's this newsletter I have to do. But, you know, one thing I haven't really had the time, I hope you have had, to really appreciate this ARP bill that just passed, you know, the American Rescue Plan, because it includes things that are generationally important, you know, with respect to, you know, support for struggling families, families with children, just all sorts of things. And boy, I'm just so proud that happened. And I think we will reap the benefit of it for years to come.
Thank you all for tuning in and for your continued engagement. I really feel blessed to have such an engaged district, and I also want to echo the remarks I said earlier that this is time for us to come together and make sure that we need to lift up the rising violence and rhetoric and hate crimes and come together as a community. So thank you all.
Okay, see you around.
Bye everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Thanks, staff. Great job.
Yes, thank you, staff, as always. Thank you, MC Lucy.
You can put up the slides with our emails.
Yeah.
Lucy's
going to start doing her own town halls, I think. No.
Making the emergency codes just plain old codes. Today, they took some public comment on this idea. It was pretty one-sided. About 100 people signed up, which is a lot. Overwhelmingly, people did not like the idea. Then again, I doubt a lot of homeless people fired up their MacBooks to weigh in. Now, the concerns are vast. They're widespread. One of the flashpoints, though, is kind of around our parks. Now, if approved, it would allow nonprofits and agencies to set up organized camps similar to the Kenton Women's Village, and they could pop up at any park or any open space zone in the city for a maximum of 180 days. Now, my inbox is full of messages from people who don't like this, from people who are downright angry about it. They're worried. They're worried about crime and drugs and sanitation in the parks where they bring their kids or they go for a jog. You know the arguments, and we've heard them 1,000 times. They're the same ones that we've heard since the beginning of this, quote, emergency. But to me, it's a little more than that. It's another example of how, instead of our ideas changing the homeless crisis, we're the ones being changed by it, despite everything we throw at it, even emergency measures. I mean, emergency measures are supposed to be temporary. When you call the fire department to come to your home, you expect them to put out the fire and leave, not build a substation in your driveway. But homelessness has proven once again to be a runaway train. And I understand if you're nervous or if you're upset at the thought of those tracks running through your neighborhood, but don't pretend you can't hear the whistle. The crisis is real. It's heading your way, and so far, it's winning. But there's hope. Once again, there is promised hope. We just passed this landmark homelessness tax that will pump $250 million a year into this battle. By April, they're going to start collecting the money. By summertime, they're going to start spending it. I want to learn a lot more about what they plan to do with this money, how they plan to use it. I hope you do too. If you do, let me know. We're going to start working on those stories now. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. All right, let's check in on what's going on in Corvallis, because it's been a pretty contentious afternoon.
We demand you finally take action, as if it is your own daughters attending this university.
So, the OSU Board of Trustees, they're deciding whether or not to fire the university's president over that sexual misconduct scandal at his previous job. We've got an update when the story continues.
Your shower look. Mold, soap scum, hard water stains just won't come clean. We'll deep clean, sterilize to hospital standards, and seal it for life. Call the pros. Call Permatree.
Add KGW News to your Amazon Alexa flash repeat.
Coming up, the new surge in common colds now that millions of kids are returning to class after months of lockdowns. Watch Inside Edition tonight at 7:30 here on KGW.
How are they getting common colds if they're keeping their masks on?
It's the Super Saturday sale. This Saturday only, you can come in and save 25% on everything in the store. Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. Live life comfortably.
Safeway and Albertsons do so much to fight hunger. One of the things they do during our great food drive that makes a huge difference is collect donations at the register. It's simple and it's powerful. So the next time you're at the register, please give. Our teachers have never shown their inspirational talents more than in 2020. To show support and recognition for our outstanding educators, the On Point Prize for Excellence in Education will pay the rent or mortgage of 3 teachers you nominate for an entire year. There are so many great teachers who inspire enthusiasm and innovation in a new generation of students, parents, and our community. It's easy to nominate a teacher, and it can be life-changing. And anyone can do it right now at onpointprize.com.
At Pacific Foods, we believe that everyone deserves access to nourishing foods. That's why we support the KGW Great Food Drive. Please give. Just go to kgw.com/food drive and make a donation.
It's Marion's biggest sale of the year. Kerosene carpet and waterproof flooring, only $1.99 a square foot. Every rugs, 20% off. Remnants, 50% off. Nobody has more flooring than Marion's, and it all comes with a low price guarantee. In Portland and Wilsonville, hurry in.
7 a.m.? No.
Not just about food, but about character, freshness, sustaining this beautiful place, and local families who care about good food and healthy eating. Oregon Dungeness Brand, the flavor of Oregon.
Welcome back. Keep sending in those questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. You can also use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter, and we're on Instagram. Not sure if you knew that, but you can follow us at the story at KGW. We don't normally do this here on the story, but we're going to be coming to you now with a little bit of breaking news. We have the next thing. It's semi-breaking news, if you will. Anyway, Oregon State University's Board of Trustees has so far today spent nearly 6 hours and counting talking about whether they should discipline or straight up fire their new president, F. King Alexander. He's facing a lot of backlash about a recent investigation that found Louisiana State University mishandled years' worth of claims of sexual assault and misconduct, including at the hands of former head football coach Les Miles. You might be wondering, well, how does Alexander fit into this? Well, it ties in because Alexander was the president at LSU before coming to Oregon State last summer. He has since said that he regrets not taking stronger action against Miles, and he repeatedly said he has the utmost sympathy for the survivors of sexual violence, and he'll work to protect them. That's if he gets to stay on the job at Oregon State. Students there are pretty upset about this report. Staff are upset, and the board is scrambling here. The stakes are really high. So high, we told Maggie Best that we actually need her live tonight for an update. So Maggie, this meeting is still going on. What is the headline right now? Do we have any type of decision or know where they're headed?
Dan, so the headline is we don't have a decision at this point. This meeting started at 12:30. As you said, it's been going on close to 6 hours at this point. And at this point, OSU's Board of Trustees is still in an executive session. Reporters are allowed to listen in on that, but we can't give you details per state law of what they're talking about. After this session wraps, which could be any time, they'll jump back into the public meeting and then basically discuss in front of the public what they want to do and make any decisions that they're inclined to make tonight. But yeah, it's still going at this point. I'll show you some video now just of the meeting throughout the day. It's been really an emotional meeting. More than 100 members of the public, mostly students and staff, submitted written testimony. 19 people actually spoke to the Board of Trustees. And the consensus from those who spoke was that OSU should have known about the investigation into LSU, Louisiana State, and they shouldn't have hired Alexander. That investigation, released a couple of weeks ago, alleged that LSU had an underfunded Title IX office. It alleged that top athletes accused of assault were protected, and it alleged that then head football coach Les Miles kept his job for years after female students accused him of sexual misconduct. So here's some of what we heard from students and staff today. And to note, you'll hear their voices, but you won't see their faces.
Survivors are here at this university to learn, not to educate you of people who abuse us, or bodies like you that uphold the systems that protect those abusers. We demand you finally take action as if it is your own daughters attending this university, risking their lives and safety on this campus. And if you're not fit for the job, I suggest all of you get the hell out of here. You have work to do, and you better start now.
This is the most vile and preventable scandal that OSU has had during my time here, at least that I can recall. When we talk about openness, the board chose a process that kept candidates safe instead of choosing a process to keep employees, students, and the community safe by being open and transparent. There is
he live streaming the party?
All right, so that was a big complaint, Dan. You might have heard that they talked about the process. OSU had a closed hiring process when bringing Alexander on board, meaning that no one heard who the other candidates for president of the university were, and they only announced who got the job. And multiple people brought that up, saying going forward, and this time around, they wanted a more transparent process and maybe even to be able to weigh in on who the school brought on board as president.
Now, once this all came to light, we've heard from Alexander a few times before, and he said that he has absolute empathy for survivors and that he acknowledges that he could have done some things better at LSU, especially when it comes to Les Miles. What did he say today? Did he speak today? What did he have to say?
Sure, so he repeated a lot of that, and you'll hear from him in a second. He also, I want to note, clarified his answer basically about what OSU knew about this process and about the investigations as they were interviewing him. So Alexander has said that conversations were had about this investigation. Well, today, he said those conversations were actually more limited to Title IX in general and the opening of offices, Title IX offices at LSU. The most explosive claims in this investigation, he noted, did not come up in the interview process. And the board of trustees said they didn't find out about this interview until the report came out earlier this month, when all this kind of came to a head. So all that in mind, here's a moment from today's public hearing where former OSU basketball star Lamar Hurd, who's on the board of trustees, asked Alexander about trust.
how can, and if you think it's possible for a leader in your position to be able to lead people that are fearful of what their experience might be moving forward. And that's in addition to the people who have expressed, like those earlier today in public comment, what their experience has been, because we can't have that.
It's my number one responsibility is campus safety. And I think we work to educate those parents, that father, that mother, that this is a safe place and it's going to be more safe because we're going to improve upon where we are now. I can always get better. I can always add more. I can do things that have the most impact for our students.
So again, that was F. King Alexander, current president of OSU, kind of answering questions and in some cases defending himself to the board of trustees at the university. Those trustees are in an executive session right now. They'll jump back into the public session, and that is where, if a decision is going to be made tonight, which we do expect one, but that could change, that's where that would happen in front of the public. Dan, so we'll stay on it obviously and have updates online, but it has been quite an intense day.
I'll be watching your Twitter feed, Maggie. Quite the delay. I think she got my point, though. Maybe you should follow her Twitter feed, too. I'm sure as soon as there's an update, she'll let us know about it. Now, look, yesterday was kind of a crazy news day, all right? There was a lot of stuff going on around here. I don't blame you if you missed this next story. The president of the Portland Police Union resigned, already stepped down. Here's the explanation that the union gave us about this. They said, we learned that Portland Police Association President Brian Hunsaker made a serious, isolated mistake related to the police bureau's investigation into the alleged hit and run by Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. Now, they didn't explain what that, quote, mistake was. Now, I know you remember this story. Earlier this month, Commissioner Hardesty was falsely named in a police report about a hit and run by the driver of the car that was hit. Turns out it was not Hardesty, and police completely cleared her of any involvement, but not before right-wing Facebook groups somehow got their hands on the report and started spreading that misinformation online. So today, we reached out to Hardesty to see if she had anything to say about the union president quitting. She told us she really doesn't know anything about the whole situation other than what we have reported, but we did ask her what she wants to see happen now that Hunsaker has resigned. Do we have that?
I hope that the due diligence, the investigation actually uncovers what the mistake was, and that we, the public, and myself included, get to know specifically what he did and why he did it, and then be held accountable for his behavior.
Okay, so pretty to the point right there. And it is worth noting Hunsaker is still employed by the Portland Police Bureau. His resignation from his union job didn't affect his job with the Bureau. Now, he was only president, actually, of the Police Association for a couple of months. He took over during this huge conversation the city and really the entire country has been having about police accountability. And of course, after months and months of protests. Here's what he told us about his plans back in January.
My goal in my capacity as president of the association is to look forward to the future, to understand what the community needs. But we follow procedure, we follow law, and we want to do things appropriately. When we do things appropriately, because that's what we are sworn to do, we also are encouraged by accountability. Accountability starts with the police. We understand that. We will be accountable, we are accountable, and we're going to come up with more ways to show our transparency and accountability.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's start with accountability. You can see he's holding himself accountable, it appears here, for whatever sort of involvement he had in this Hardesty case by stepping down. But that other part about the transparency, that's still kind of an issue because we don't know what he did, what mistake he made. We've asked the police association, but they won't tell us. The mayor, who also serves as the police commissioner, says he hasn't been told either. And in fact, he's actually demanding to know what Hunsaker did. We can speculate. A lot of people are speculating, but maybe you're doing it right now in your head or to the person sitting next to you on the couch. But that's just kind of more fuel for the misinformation fire, which no one needs to do right now. So we're going to keep asking the questions and hopefully soon get some answers. All right, keep sending in your thoughts, your questions, whatever's on your mind. We're going to finish the story. Maybe I'll read one of your comments or something like that right after the break. We'll see you then. Blazers fans rock it, and KGW is all over it. 3-on-3 Blazers podcast, and it gets crazy. Get out of here! You gotta hear it. The playoffs. Look, he's so fake right now. There's not a chance. I know it. 3-on-3 Blazers for KGW, wherever you get your podcasts.
Experience affordable luxury inside and out at Audi Wilsonville. If you think an Audi is out of reach, look again, because now's the time to upgrade to quality. Indulge in this Q3 Quattro S-Line Premium for $419 a month. Go hybrid with the Q5e Quattro Premium for only $459 a month. Take the lead with the Audi Q5 Quattro Premium for $479 a month. Upgrade to quality. Audi Wilsonville.
The Gresham Owens Corning is now hiring for production and maintenance roles at our insulation manufacturing plant. Be part of a company whose people and products make a material difference in the world. Gresham Owens Corning offers competitive pay, great benefits, and a $1,000 sign-on bonus. Apply online today at owenscorningcareers.com.
Ready, set, go. Live big in the larger-than-life SUVs from GMC. The GMC Acadia, Terrain, and all-new Yukon. Step up to GMC and get $4,700 purchase cash on most 2021 Acadia models. Plus, current eligible GMC owners get an additional $1,000 purchase allowance. See your Northwest GMC dealer. We pledge allegiance to you, Kirk and Evie, and your 4-door, all-wheel drive umbrella for one. Sorry, Kirk. Auto insurance from PEMCO, defender of your Northwest.
Jennifer said, "Hey Dan, that awkward silence with you and Maggie Vespa staring into each other's eyes was hilarious." Yeah, she was live tonight, so we had to do a little live thing. She's from her living room. It's kind of tough to kind of balance those things out, but don't try a staring contest with Maggie Vespa. You will lose every time. We don't have a lot of time because Maggie had a big report tonight, so we're kind of out of it right now, but time that is, and our minds. We'll see you tomorrow.
What?
Due to the pandemic, the need for food has almost doubled. 1 in 4 are children. You can help. Go to kgw.com/food drive and make a donation. $10 provides 30 meals. Give with your heart.
This past year has been a roller coaster ride, and our Most family just wants to say thank you.